Well, welcome everyone to Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross. I am your host and resource for self-care, as well as connections and collaborations. And I am excited to have with me today because often we've struggled with our emotions, anxieties, all kinds of things. And I couldn't think of a better person to bring on. Reneau Peurifoy has had 20 years of experience in private practice as marriage and a family therapist. He also specializes in anxiety disorders, but he left his practice and he now teaches at a college in Sacramento, California. He's also a speaker and an author of 4 books. So I would like to introduce everyone to Reneau. Reneau, thank you for joining us.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So tell me, what inspired you to do that shift from a private practice to teaching, and how did that impact your perspective?
Well, I had 2 kids that needed to go to college, so private practice in California is, it was difficult. It's not the easiest state to do that in if you're not connected to a large institution. And I was a sole practitioner. I had a couple interns and did a lot of work. I worked with anxiety disorders, and so a lot of people I worked with were out of work or had low income jobs and stuff. And so I did a lot of sliding scale, and it was an economic decision, basically.
Okay. But so how did your experience then as a therapist kind of shape your approach to, writing about emotional mastery and teaching?
Well, I was a teacher originally, working with a secondary. In fact, I taught 2 years over in Japan, and then came back and got my master's and started the private practice. So my teaching background really influences how I write. That's why at the end of every chapter, I always have a set of recommended activities. Here's how you apply the material. Because a lot of books I find they tell you a lot about what's going on and how it happens, but they don't tell you how do you apply this to your life. So that was always my intent. In fact, when I taught psychology at the college, that was always one of the things I was very big on, is how do you take this information and actually apply it? Because a lot of the textbooks, they give you a lot of theory and they'll give you a few things that you can do, but a lot of times they're not all that effective. So how do you actually apply things to your life? That's always been my goal, to make things better. One of the people I liked early on was Alfred Adler, and one of his ideas was that sometimes just a little change makes a big difference in a person's life. You don't need to change the whole building if you just need to rearrange 1 or 2 of the rooms inside. So that's always been kind of my approach too.
Yeah, and I think it's very helpful. So one of the things we definitely want to talk about today is one of your newest books, is Why You Feel the Way You Do. And you shared that with me. And that's one thing I enjoyed about it, is that, I had not only did it have the exercises, but it had some examples in there of, of what you meant by the topic and stuff that you searched. So kind of helps put it in perspective a little better than just reading terms, and because not all of us are good at doing that deep dive,
Right.
I don't think.
Right. And a lot of the students I worked with, I found, vocabulary was a real problem. I'd say, in fact, over in Japan, it was especially a problem. I was always defining terms. And so how do you say things, take a complex term or complex concept, how do you put it into a simpler way that is easy to understand for somebody who's not technically minded or doesn't have that type of background?
Right. So your book talks about the 7 core emotions. Can you go into maybe a little bit detail, explain like what those 7 core emotions are and how that plays a role in our lives?
Right. Well, emotions actually, like everything else in us that we're made up of, plays multiple roles. They're basically what neuroscience calls an affect, and an affect is a circuit in the brain that pushes you to do something. It pushes a specific desire for behavior. The simplest ones are your sensory affects, heat, cold, pressure. If you're cold, the colder you get, the more you have a desire to get warm, and everything else that you think about kind of goes out of your mind. Same thing if you've been sitting for a long time for a lecture or something, then pretty soon, you need to move around, and that pressure it starts to exert, a desire inside of you. And the next set are what they call the homeostatic affects, and homeostasis is just a really fancy word for balance. So things that keep balance in your body. So things like hunger and thirst. Again, the thirstier you are, the more you want to eat or drink something, and all those other higher thoughts and stuff kind of go out of your brain as that desire becomes stronger and stronger. So emotions are the same way. They're there to address a need, and if that need is not being taken care of, the particular emotional pushes you stronger and stronger. Okay. So the ones that everybody knows are most familiar with are anger and fear, of course, and those are both directed towards a threat. And when we use the terms anger and fear, we're using them in a very broad sense. So anger can be just simply irritation, you're bugging me, or rage, right?
Right.
And then fear can just be apprehension. I got a test or an interview coming up, so I'm a little bit nervous about that. To panic, having panic attacks. And again, both of those have to do with threat. Anger tends to be the threat is manageable, so I need to get rid of it. You're stepping on my toes, please get off. And whereas fear is the threat is unmanageable. Grizzly bear's coming at me, so not very manageable. So I'm going to go the other way, right?
Right.
or I'm really fearful about this interview, so I don't think I'm going to do well. So I get a lot of anxiety, or there's unknowns there, right? That may not be manageable. So, and again, our perception of a threat is shaped by our experience, our beliefs, our expectations, and sometimes you get a mixture of those, right? And that's the interesting thing, is that you can have more than two circuits firing at the same time in the brain. So you can have mixed emotions going on. My child is going off to college. I'm happy, I'm sad, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And then some of the circuits that are kind of interesting. One is the seeking circuit, and that has to do with you look at any baby, any puppy, kitten, because again we share these with all the other mammals. Anything that has fur on it has the same basic circuitry, just like they have the same hearts and lungs, and they may function a little bit differently, but they're essentially the same. And they'll want to explore the environment. If you got a baby, they're out there chewing on everything, they're looking at everything, they're crawling around, trying to figure out what's going on. And it's an impulse to explore the environment to see, is it safe or is it there danger out there? And it's what's the basis of our curiosity. It's also why when you're sitting in a room and somebody walks in, everybody looks and then they go back to what they're doing. And it's just that desire to what's happening, what's going on, or if you go to a new place, the first thing you do is you kind of glance around, just look at things and taking it in. Even though you may be thinking about other stuff, there's that other circuit kind of saying, okay, what's out there, and then another one that's kind of interesting is the play circuit. And one of the guys that did a lot of this original research, Panksepp, he was called the rat tickler because he worked with rats, and he found that if you tickled them and then you recorded their voices and then you slowed it down, it sounds just like laughter. And the interesting thing is you can cut off or shut down the higher thinking parts of the rat's brain, and they still want to play. It's a very deep-seated need to play. And anybody who's had a little kid knows that they want to play, right? About my 3.5-year-old great granddaughter, tickle me, favorite thing she likes to do. And of course, it's how social animals learn limits. Your 2-year-old or your 3.5-year-old or 5-year-old, they go too far, and that's too far. And as adults, we still like to play. We still have that desire to interact with other people. And again, all these circuits can be shut down and can be, thwarted depending upon your, experiences. There's actually two circuits that bond people together in addition to these. One, of course, is the separation anxiety. They call it the fear circuit, but it's most easily understood as like with babies, when whatever their parent is separated from, they get anxious and they start to cry. And then that triggers what's called the caring circuit in the adult. And those two circuits are the basis of the love we feel for people and why we miss them. And then, of course, there's the old lust circuit.
Yeah.
Everybody starts feeling that one around adolescence, right? And that's another one that kind of helps to bond people. And again, as I said, these circuits are not the same in everybody, and they vary, just like your ability to do math or your ability to throw a ball or whatever. And one of the sad examples is the babies that were raised in orphanages where they were never touched, and they had a bottle propped up and they were changed, but nobody ever came to them when they cried. And so they learned basically that nobody's going to come, and so they quit crying. And when they were adopted, a simple experiment that was done is, if you take a mother with their birth child, around toddler, and you play this little video game and you measure their oxytocin levels, which is one of the hormones associated with that caring circuit,
Mm-hmm.
it just goes skyrocket. But if you take these babies, it just stays flat. It doesn't, nothing happens, which indicates that the circuitry has somehow been atrophied, kind of like a muscle that's not been used and has shut down. Now, with proper treatment stuff, they can reactivate some of that. They can start to do attachment because they have what's called an attachment disorder. They don't attach with a parent. They don't respond to them like a child that's been there from birth and had normal interactions. So again, your early childhood experiences can shape how these are expressed. The secondary emotions like pride, uh, uh, patriotism, guilt, shame, all those kind of grow out of these. Guilt, for example, is I've done something that cognitively I believe I shouldn't do, right? And that can
Right.
trigger fear or it can trigger anger, right? I can be sad because I've lost a part of me that I thought I had. I can be angry with myself, or I can be angry at whatever caused me to do that thing, that I project out there. So they get shaped by the higher, what they call the secondary emotions are all kind of based on these, but they kind of get mixed up and filtered through your belief system. But those are the seven core ones. And again, like I said, that they're all just about basic needs. And one of the other things that's interesting about emotions is they're how the brain indexes information. And this is something that a lot of people don't know, and it's not talked about too much. But the brain is always making associations. And so from the time you're born, in fact, even in the time you're in the womb, the brain is making associations between good and bad things. And most of the day, most of the activity going on inside your brain, you're not aware of. I'm walking down the street. My brain is assessing dangers, assessing good stuff, assessing distance, coordinating the body, doing all kinds of stuff. Truck goes by or something, it'll make me aware of it. So it's always looking out for anything that's been associated with good or bad while I'm thinking about lunch or I'm thinking about, somebody I'm going to go see or something of that nature. And it's good because all this automatic activity means I don't have to think about that stuff, right? I don't have to be constantly looking out. Like when I'm driving, I don't have to be, aware of every single thing. And the brain's going to take care of a lot of that stuff for me. It's also why experiential learning is so important and more important than just simple book learning. Again, to use the driving example, I can read everything there is to know about driving and I can have a good understanding of how to drive a car. But until I actually get inside of it and behind the wheel, that's when I start experiencing, oh my gosh, that didn't work. Oh, this feels good. And as I practice, all that becomes an unconscious response pattern that now I can listen to the radio or again think about where I'm going or things of that nature. And the brain, that subconscious takes over all that stuff. And of course, the downside is sometimes we have experiences where things become associated with danger that in normal life are not dangerous. And again, we call these triggers, right? A person who's been in an abusive background, the tone of voice, certain types of situations, times of year, will sometimes be associated with danger. And now they're out of that environment, but they're still reacting to those things. I mean, PTSD is probably the biggest example. A person's in a
Right.
war zone and all the sights, sounds, and things there that protect them and keep them safe. Now they come back into a safe environment, but they're still getting triggered by a lot of those things. I had one guy, I remember, he came back from the Middle East conflict, and the car backfired, and he found himself covering up, down to the ground, and it was just an automatic response, that he had back then that
Mm-hmm.
got triggered when he was here. And of
You
course,
mentioned that, and it's funny that you mentioned that because my late husband used to have to deploy to Honduras, and
okay,
he came back one time, and we were at home, and my parents had hit the garage door. It made a noise, and he about hit the ground. And
yep, yep,
our first reaction was to laugh. We thought it was funny, but it's really
right,
not funny. It was a trigger because it hit something with him, and then we
yeah,
kind of understood why. But
oh yeah.
it was just kind of a knee jerk trigger and reaction.
And the harsher the environment you come out of, the stronger these things are because they're protective devices. They're the way you protect yourself. So people that come out of parts of the world where there's civil war or where there's, harsh regimes and things of that nature, a lot of times have very rigid should must rules about how you act, what you can do, what you can't do, along with these unconscious triggers that are all part of how they survive. Because the world used to be a very harsh place and still is in many, many places of the world. And fortunately, we live in a very relatively safe and comfortable situation here in the U.S. And lots of parts of the world don't enjoy that.
No, but that doesn't make all those parts of the world bad, because I've had people that say, "Oh, we can't go there. This is going on." I'm like, okay, that's over here. That's not here. I mean, it's just we have our
Yeah.
areas too, where you wouldn't want
Oh
to roam
yeah,
at night
yeah,
necessarily. So,
yeah.
but again, I think like you said, it comes down to those perceptions and stuff.
Yeah.
So, how can one quietly, kind of effectively quiet those destructive emotional triggers and negative responses?
Well, there's kind of simple responses, and then there's the more complex ones. So I know in the book I talk about a couple people that were in a plane that got hit by lightning that I worked with at different situations. But my brother actually he told me about that too, and it's like a bomb goes off in the airplane when it gets hit by lightning, and after the next flight, they're a little nervous, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one person is able to eventually become comfortable flying again, while the other person became just they could no longer they just the fear just paralyzed them. And what keeps this going, these responses, is a lot of your self-talk and how you respond to it. And so when I work with people with a simple response, I use what's called a what's happening, what's real. You label what's going on, and you have to bring yourself back into reality with what's real, and then you distract yourself. Because when these triggers get fired, the conscious part of your brain shuts down. It's like that unconscious takes over. In fact, that's true whenever there's strong emotions. The stronger the emotion, the harder it is to think logically, which is why emergency personnel, military, anybody who deals with highly emotional situations gets trained so that they just react. They don't have to think about it. This is just what I do in this situation. Because if they have to think consciously about it, it's they're not going to be effective. Because again,
Right.
there's too much emotion, too much adrenaline, too much stuff going on inside of their body. So, and the person who's able to calm themselves, they would say things like, "Okay, I was safe. Nothing really happened. It was scary, yeah, but we got down safely, and probably once in a lifetime event. Never going to experience that again. Okay, let me focus on what I need to do to get ready." Uh, the person where it escalates, they reinforce that response with thoughts like, "Oh my gosh, what if it happens again? Oh, what if we crash? Oh, this is terrible. I can't stand it. Why is this happening to me?" Thoughts like that, which escalate and reinforce the trigger. And in fact, when I worked with panic disorder, which is one of the things I specialized in for 20 years, that's one of the things that was the key to getting them to where they could normalize anxiety and not experience it as panic anymore, is to work
Right.
with that self-talk. Because they would have in fact, maybe digress with that for just a moment. uh, Again, I mentioned that when you have needs that you're not taking care of, they push at you. They push at you emotionally, or they push at you physically, depending upon how you're wired. The people I worked with anxiety disorders, especially with panic disorder, they tended to be more reactive individuals. So again, everything with human beings exists over a normal curve. Some people are tall, some people are short, and then there's an average height. Some people have very reactive nervous systems, and some people you got to whap them upside the head to get them to notice something. Uh,
I know some of those.
well, yeah, well, and I tend to be on the reactive side, so it was fun working with this group of people because we related to each other really well. Even though I never had panic attacks, partly because of my personality. But it's a good quality. It's the quality about them that other people like, because they were empathetic. They could tune into people, they notice stuff, but they were like a house where the wire's not quite up to code, and so too many things plugged in, and the circuit breakers trip. So I would ask them, "So tell me, what was going on when you had your first panic attack?" And they'd say things like, "Well, I was working full time, and let's see, taking care of my dad. He was going downhill, and this is my fiance decided he didn't want to get married. So don't understand why I had, as like you say, wait a minute, I think I figured this out. What they usually had was a stress reaction, and they didn't realize it. Then sometimes there was a medical thing or something else that kicked it off. But most often it was a stress reaction, but because they like to do things well and they tended to ignore their body, uh, it just basically, it got overloaded, and they had this adrenaline rush, which they didn't understand. And so then they would start to watch their body. Oh my gosh, what if it happens again? And then of course, catastrophizing, what if I
Mm-hmm.
can't do this? What if what if I go crazy? What if it means there's a brain tumor? What, they do all this what if thinking. And so you have to get control over that. And the first step always is having a simple explanation. And this has to do with any kind of negative core response pattern you have. And these would be the more complex types of triggers. So with panic disorder, it would be the things like, okay, I had a stress reaction, and because I didn't understand it, I started watching my body and telling myself scary things about it. I'm safe. I'm in control. I've never passed out. You do this type of self-talk, you go through a process of desensitization. And the same thing would be true for somebody who's grown up in a background where there's, a dysfunctional background. Let's say there was a lot of violence, and there's different ways a child can respond to it. And maybe the one we're thinking about right now has, they learned that the way I survive in this household is I avoid conflict. So I keep my mouth shut, keep my head down. I just agree with what's ever going on. I just go on along with the program, and I kind of try to stay under the wire all the time. And so this becomes an automatic, again, response pattern. And then as an adult, they'll come in and they'll say, well, I don't understand. I was out to lunch. I wanted to order this one thing. My friend said I shouldn't do it. And so I just automatically agree with them. I have a really hard time speaking up at work. My partner, I rarely, if they want to watch something, I want to watch something else, I won't speak up. So why is this? And so it's simple. It's because you learned that conflict was dangerous. So we put a label on it so that now I have a way to think about it. One of the problems with dealing with unconscious behavior patterns is they're unconscious. You're not aware of why it's happening, right? All you see is the end result. So it's important to put a label on it. So now I can think about it. It doesn't change it, but now I can think about it. So then what I would do is, okay, let's come up with a series of situations where it comes up. With panic disorder, we would do a hierarchy. Okay, here are the things we avoid. Here's how hard they are. We start with the easy ones and work forward. You do the same thing with a core response pattern like conflict is dangerous. Okay, let me identify specifically, and the more specific you can be, the more effective you are, where that pattern emerges in my life. Okay, it emerges, again, TV. I don't speak up when I want to watch something. I will agree with people, and I won't express my opinion. With my kids, I tend to give in a lot, and when I probably shouldn't. So you identify all these different areas, and you say, okay, what are the easiest ones? And let's start doing the opposite behavior. And I start practicing that behavior until it becomes comfortable. And then you move on to the next one. And over time, you get to where those new behaviors are part of who you are. Along with that, it's useful to have reasons for why I'm doing this. And so I will oftentimes have a person on a card write out some of the reasons why. In the case of conflict is dangerous, we're talking about asserting yourself, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of times we would have assertiveness things. I have the right to speak up. I have the right to have what I want. I'm safe now. I'm never going to see that parent again. I'm never going to be in that situation. I'm an adult now. I have adult abilities. I can use them. And so they read those cards for a week or two until all that stuff gets in their head. So now they have ways of countering some of those feelings that come up as they're practicing the new behaviors. And the process of desensitization, it's really very mechanical, and it works. I've taken people through it in all kinds of different ways, and it works. The first job you went to, you were nervous, you weren't sure about doing it, but after a while, it just became a job. And then you go to your next job, and the whole thing starts over again. Then you desensitize to it. Marriage, right? At first, there's a lot of anxiety about different things, but after a while, it's just, I'm just married,
And you get in that comfortable mode.
Yeah.
I know we have a lot more detail to discuss. We're going to have to take a quick break from our sponsors, and we will be right back, and we're going to finish that conversation. Okay. So we'll be right back.
Hello, my name is Peter. I'm a Dharma Master. I teach Qigong at the Bright Beings Academy. What kind of Qigong do we teach? Well, it helps you to get your mind into your body and your breath very quickly. We really start off with quite quick movements to help cater for the busy Western mind, coming into stretching out the meridians, waking up the chakra system and the danjons, coming into Jigan meditation, which helps you to really focus on the energy in and around your body, bringing you into that beautiful calm state where you can sit and meditate really easily, whereas maybe before you found it really difficult. So Qigong at the Bright Beings Academy will help you get more in touch with yourself.
Relief for PTSD, anxiety, pain, insomnia, and many other ailments. Introducing Vibe, the world's only pocket PEMF device. You place in your pocket while cooking, cleaning, relaxing, watching TV, sitting at your computer, reading, or walking. Self-contained standalone device. No drugs. No other phone or Bluetooth connections required. No monthly subscription fees. No apps to download. No Bozone. The future of medicine is in the frequencies. Come join the revolution.
Hi, I'm Bobby Aldridge with BAM Metrics. There are so many programs out there that measure your swing speed, sets, reps, your BMI, your body fat. But the one thing they're not measuring that's so essential is mobility. Mobility is the key. If you're measuring your mobility, your performance will get better and you will reduce your pain. I created BAM Metrics to make it easy for people to repeat the exercises so they could do it properly at home on their own. It's simple, it's easy to do, and from a senior to a pro athlete.
Hi, I'm Sarah Stockham, and I'm host of Simply Sarah. Join me Thursdays at 3 p.m. Pacific on the Achieve TV network for the best energetic tools to elevate your amazing life right here on E360 TV.
And we are back. So yeah, like you're saying, there's different anxieties, and you mentioned like even getting married, because you have that anxiety, you get all nervous before your wedding day, you get nervous about doing all the things you normally do, but now you're doing it around someone else. But then you kind of get into the whole like comfortable mode, and
Yeah,
I guess in a way you would kind of wonder why you got so anxious about it in the first place.
Well, you desensitize. It's something new. It's the circuits that are, there's potential danger. And so there's some of that nervousness there, and you're not sure how this is going to work. But after a while, like I said, you do desensitize to it, and that's something that people go through all the time. So it is a mechanical process, and regardless of what the negative triggers are, you can desensitize to them just the same way. You just have to go about it in the right way. And I think it's important to point out that occasionally the old things will fire. You see a lot of the computer analogies. I'm going to rewrite the program, delete this. Not the way the brain works. The brain's an organic entity, and it's like a muscle. You strengthen associations, you weaken others. The other ones will occasionally fire if the right set of circumstances are going on, especially if you're sick, hungry, tired, or under stress. And that's a real key. Is a lot of times when you see old stuff coming up, it's because you're sick, hungry, tired, or you're under stress. And it's just, some of the thinking part of your brain is kind of quieted down, and some of that old stuff is kind of rumbling around in the background. And once you understand that, then you take it just as a message. It's a message. I need to maybe manage what's going on in my life right now a little bit more effectively.
Kind of a thanks for showing up, but I'm moving on. I got to go back to where I was.
When I had somebody with panic disorder come back after 6 months or so, and they said, well, I had a panic attack. I don't understand what that's about. I said, let's just go through the checklist, because that's one of the things I would, for what they call recovery, for relapse prevention, you do is you go through the checklist. Okay, how's my primary relationship? How's my kids? How's work going? How's my friendships? How's my life goals? Anything big happened lately? Because again, their first reaction a lot of times would say, well, this happened, but it wasn't a big deal. Well, your reaction says it was a big deal. So you need to figure out how you're going to deal with it. I used to tell my clients, I'm just a positive realist. Sometimes life throws you a curve, but you just got to deal with it. Figure out come up with a plan and then work your plan as best you can.
So do you find the anxieties or the panics were not necessarily about what they thought it was about? It's something deeper or something that maybe that's totally unrelated, but it's actually influenced them?
Well, again, people focus on the symptoms rather than on the cause.
Right.
And, a lot of times once they focused on the cause, it was much easier to start to figure out how to manage it. Now, again, with panic disorder, the anxiety itself and the fear of something crazy happening was the big thing they had to deal with. And then after that, once they learned that anxiety is a normal part of life, just identifying, okay, I'm anxious, so where's the threat, where's the loss, because again, we're dealing with threat and loss for the most part. Either I'm getting some goodies, or I'm avoiding threat, or I'm avoiding loss. And that's when you start looking at things in those simple terms, it becomes much easier to identify what's going on. Example I use a lot is, I'm sitting at the computer. Well, first of all, a couple of my stress indicators. One is there's a change sometimes in how I use language. To understand that, my dad was a career Navy person. And then I'll spend a lot of time just, playing around on the computer with some stupid little game, whatever. And, fortunately, I've been married for a long time, and, my mate will point these things out to me. They're wonderful that way. So I think I go through the checklist, right, and identify, well, my best friend just moved away. Okay, I must be just lonely. I'm missing my friend. So that's what's going on underneath all this stuff. So what's the solution for loneliness? Well, I need to have a relationship, right? I need to either start pulling on other friends that I have. If I don't have any friends, I better go out and find one. Cultivate some new relationships, maybe connect with the friend who's moved away through Zoom or something. But anyway, I need that connection. That's what's missing in my life. So that's what I need to address. And that's a lot of what you do when you work with people in therapy, basically, is just identifying, where is, the loss or the threat, and what are you going to do with it? How are you going, what steps are you going to take in your life to address that hole that's there in your life?
Right. And you've done, was that one of your first books, the Anxiety, Phobias and Panic? Was that one of your first books?
That was the first one. And that actually came out of what was it, an 8-week program mail order program that I did with, back then cassette tapes, nowadays it would be different recordings. Yeah, in fact, my kids were the fulfillment officers. I'd pay them a certain amount of money for every package that they put together. And I said, this is getting kind of burdensome. So why don't I just put it all in a book? And it was just a series of lessons that take people through all the things they need to do to overcome panic disorder. Still being sold, still doing fine. So
I saw that had multiple revisions and it had a great success. Why do you think it resonates with so many people?
Well, it was the first what they call multimodal approach. When I started, you had your cognitive people, your psychodynamic people, your behavioral people, and you'd go to a conference and they'd all be sitting in their little groups and they'd laugh at when the people from the other group would come up. And I said, wait a minute, you need to do the specific thing or a combination of things that's going to work for a specific person is going to be different from what that would be for another person. So let me just put everything I know how to do, whether it has to do with, anxiety, what if thinking, cognitive distortion, assertiveness. Let me just put it all out there, and people will find those sections that are most important for them to deal with. And again, my teaching background, it was set up as a series of lessons with recommended activities, how to do things. And so, yeah, it's sold over 300,000 copies now. So I'm very pleased with it.
Yeah. And I love that approach too, because we use too much, I think, of the one size fits all. It's like, we're not a one size fits all. Self-care isn't a one size fits all. We're individuals for a reason. So we all resonate differently with things.
It's the old saying, if all you got's a hammer, everything's a nail. So
yeah, it is. You were making the computer analogies. I was like, that's what a lot of stuff that we always refer to is like, it's like a computer. I'm like, you put garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. So, I try to put better things, in my brain.
And to some degree, some of it applies. It's just important to understand that we are not a set of capacitors and wiring and integrated circuits. We're an organic being, and while there's some similarities, there's some big differences. I read an article once that was really interesting. It talked about how a robot, to be really effective, would have
Hmm.
to have some kind of emotional system to sort the important from the unimportant. Because right now, of course, it's got a database. It has to just start at the beginning, run through the whole thing until it finds the pertinent information. And this is what's interesting when you use modalities like EMDR, eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing, which triggers on some of the emotional stuff. And I don't want to get into the big discussion of how it works, but you get an event that has a specific emotion to it. And then as you're doing the process, the person will recall a whole bunch of events that are from just a surface level, totally unrelated, but they all have the same emotional content. And again, it's how the brain again ties things together. Things that have similar emotional content, those pieces of information seem to get tied together in the brain. Again, it's an indexing system for the brain.
Right. So would you say your biggest or best tip to give people is to start with the checklist, the what is and what's real?
Well, yeah, I mean that's a simple way to start with things. And again, it's like we just said, it's hard to put one shoe fits all.
Right.
I think my basic message is if there are areas of your life that aren't working well, um, get some books or go seek help. Go to, there's things out there nowadays that, especially since I started practicing, the knowledge base has really gotten very sophisticated. There's a lot of garbage and a lot of nonsense stuff out there as well. But there's some really good, effective ways of changing how you think and how you feel. Uh, Emotions, again, are part of that subconscious part of your brain, and to become aware of what's driving them and then how do I address those needs that they represent is a big part of how you become successful in life. And the more you're what we call coherent, the more that your rational thinking, the more that your belief systems match those subconscious patterns, then the more effective you are in life.
Yeah, I think there's some things that, because I've caught myself where I say stuff and I'm like, yeah, okay, no, not a good self-talk. You can change it.
Yeah.
You talk about phobias. When I was in Iceland, we had a chemical warfare exercise where you had to put on the whole suit and the mask.
Right,
Well,
right,
that's
right.
pretty much when I found out I was claustrophobic because I hyperventilated. It filled up
Yeah.
with water and after that, I have trouble with breathing and it makes me want to panic. But I had another job in a clean room where I had to put a whole suit on head to toe and have a thing up. And I didn't want to not get the job. So I had to keep sitting there telling me there's thousands of people in here. They haven't dropped over. They're breathing. They're just fine. I can do this,
Yeah.
and then after a while, it just got to be common practice. It wasn't a big deal anymore.
Yeah, so desensitization works. And again, there are some things you can do. Again, throughout my practice, I used a lot of different things. And to start with, I used hypnosis, and then I went into some of the other modalities like EMDR and some of that type of stuff. And a lot of things that can help to hurry up that desensitization process. So if you got the right person who's got the ability to use the technique well, because again, a lot of times people will say they can do something, but they aren't necessarily able to do it, which is why I think you need to be a wise consumer. So if you do go to therapy, I think I used to tell my clients, think of me like a used car dealer. Don't buy anything I'm selling. I don't know you. You know yourself better than I do. I'm an outside observer. I'm making some observations. I'm, putting some things together, but you're the one that has to take a look at it and say, does this actually fit or not? And sometimes it would, sometimes it wouldn't. So we would talk about that. So we turn our lives over to experts, I think, too much nowadays. And in fact, that was one of the big themes that I had with a lot of my clients is you need to start trusting your ability to look at things and make decisions about whether they're good or bad for you or whether they're working or not. And I just find, we sometimes too readily, because this person has some letters behind their names or their, some reputation, that I turn myself over to them without any kind of logical evaluation of it.
Yeah, but I think they're helpful and they have their place. I know after I lost my husband, I went and saw, a psychologist. And for me, it was nice just because it was someone that didn't know me, didn't know
Right.
they knew how I felt or whatever,
Right.
just someone you could talk to and vent to without, any kind
Right.
of judgment or that preconceived
Right.
notion of, they're knowing how knowing how you feel. But
Right.
by the sixth session, when you wanted me to write him a letter to tell him goodbye, I was like, oh no, I'm done, because that's not happening.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do that. It wasn't in me. I was like, yep, nope, I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was a good relief at the time.
Yeah. And precisely. And so, yeah. So find the right person. And if it clicks, then you can do marvelous things.
Yeah. And I think that's important too, because that's a lot of times, find that we're bouncing things off of people and waiting before you do something. It's like, we're all intelligent people. If you're good with it and, then go with it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't need everybody's approval.
So to answer your question, there's help out there in a lot of different formats.
Yep.
I mean, things like this video, sometimes we'll give people the key to maybe doing something a little different that's going to make a big difference in their life. So don't stay stuck where you're at. Reach out or go out and find some stuff. Let that seeking circuit push you to find the thing that's going to be good for you.
Yeah, figure out what works for you. Definitely. Yeah. I got your website back up, whyemotions.com.
Yep.
So that is that a good way for everyone to get a hold of you? Or I know in
everything
your books,
about me is there. Links to my books, and again, they're in audio and paper as well as Kindle, and my YouTube channel, some freebies. I've got the program I used with my wife for her birthday, which was interesting because we did a anchor for her, touch her shoulder, and I'd say relax, so we anchored that into relaxation response. And I remember the gynecologist saying, does this stuff work? I said, sure, watch this. A big contraction. Okay, relax, dear. See, nice and relaxed. So speeds things up. So it was kind of a fun thing back at that time in my life to work with some of that stuff.
So is that some of the videos then that you have on your YouTube? Because I know your YouTube has like practical life skills.
Those are audio programs over on the website.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a surgery prep audio program that works pretty good too.
Oh, nice. So what other programs and things that do you do like that?
Well, the main thing are the relaxation response ones I used to use with my clients. Again, part of for people that have a severe anxiety is learning how to relax. And it's interesting because the first time they would listen to those relaxation programs, a lot of times it would make them anxious because just that feeling of relaxation was so foreign to them. And it took them, they had literally desensitized to what it felt like to be relaxed. But after a while, again, attaching that to a trigger, again, just a simple positive trigger, right? And then I used where they would put their two fingers and their thumb together as an anchor, because that was something they could do out in public, and it wouldn't totally take away everything, but it would take enough the edge off along with the self-talk and the other tools, the breathing tools and stuff that they could help to relax the body. So now they could engage the conscious mind and go through the desensitization process.
That's amazing. So your YouTube channel has the practical life skills videos on there as well? Your YouTube channel?
Yeah. In fact, I've got like a 2-part thing on panic disorder. I've got some 4-part thing on anger, and got some stuff on what we're talking about today with, what emotions are and things of that nature. So whole bunch of stuff. So
yeah, because like you said in the beginning, sometimes we get several emotions going, and we're kind of, someone will ask you what's wrong, not even sure what's wrong. You can list like this, and this, because it's tough to figure out sometimes if you've got too many emotions going in one time.
It is, and again, you can learn to read yourself more clearly over time, if you practice it. And I think that's the biggest problem is a lot of times people have never been taught how to identify what's going on inside of them. We certainly don't teach it in school. And if you grow up in a chaotic family where certain emotions are taboo, I'm not supposed to feel this or that, and so they rumble along in the background, you don't even realize that that's going on. You have the person in the office and they're ripping the arms off the chair, and you say, gee, you seem to have seem to be upset about that. No, I'm fine.
Your body language says something different. I've been called out on that before. Not necessarily anger, but I was just like, something was bugging me, I was upset, and I'm just trying to
Yeah.
put the smile on somebody. She's like, no, she says that your body says something different. Come talk to me. And I
Yeah,
was like, okay.
So you can learn to identify, because everything you do has a behavioral thing attached to it, and so once you learn to identify, okay, I'm doing my upset behavior, I'm doing my angry behavior, I'm doing my sad behavior, then once you identify that these are the things I do when I feel this way. In fact, I would say, tell people, let's go back to a time like with the anger thing. I want you to think about times when you knew you were angry about something. How did you act differently? What did you do differently from the way you normally act? Okay, those are some of your anger behaviors. Or if you were really sad, what were some of the behaviors you used to do at that time? Or, whatever, if you're working with jealousy, what are your jealous behaviors, or what are your guilt behaviors? And then, okay, now we can take a look at how do we resolve the issue that's generating that.
Right. Yeah, like you said, get to the underlying cause and not just not just what's happening.
And they all get manifested, whether we're talking about shame or whatever. They have specific things that you think, say, and do when those things are triggered. So once you become self-aware to these are my behaviors for that particular thing, then now I can address the underlying issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think a lot of us spend time trying to get to the cause. We just kind of want to fix or move on or cover it.
Yeah, we do what I call circular thinking. It's just, I don't understand. Why is this happening? Oh my gosh, why is this happening? I don't understand. And it's funny. People my clients would do that, and I would say, so why do you think that's happening? And they would give me a perfectly good explanation, and then go right back into, I don't understand though. Yeah.
So they're giving you the answer, but they're not really listening to themselves.
A lot of times we know it, but we don't want to accept it. It's a part of reality that doesn't match our beliefs about myself or others or the way things should be. And so even though, a simple example, life should be fair, right? Okay, my friend treated me unfairly. I don't understand why he did that. Why would somebody act that way? This just doesn't make sense to me. So what are some possibilities? Well, you just got him on a bad day. Maybe he's a jerk that treats everybody that way. Maybe, you can come up with all kinds of reasons. But no, if my belief is people should be fair, my friend did not treat me unfairly. I don't understand why somebody would act that way. If that's a rigid rule for yourself, then you'll get caught in that circular why questioning. And that's the other thing is working with things like those should must rules that you have and taking a look at them and where do they interfere with your life? Where do they serve you well? I like to be on time. That's a good rule. Some people, they get nuts, they start driving crazy, cursing at cars and everything else.
Yeah.
Rather than accepting that I like to be on time, I'm not going to be. And so I would tell people, like with those types of should must things, just change your vocabulary. It's not I have to be on time. I like to be on time. I want to be on time, but sometimes I'm not going to be able to. And that's interesting too, because should must rules, when you have rigid rules in your life like that, and again, the harsher the environment you come out, the more those you'll have those, right?
Mm-hmm.
My mom was German, so we had a lot of should must rules growing up. But anyway, it's like this parent is following you around saying, you have to do these things. Yeah, I would tell clients when we talk about this stuff, okay, stay home, don't come to school. You don't have to come to school. Oh, but I have to come to school. No, you don't. Stay home. But if I don't come to school, then I'm going to flunk, and then I'm not going to get the job I want. And they go on and on. So you're choosing to come to school because you're getting a benefit. And that's another concept that I constantly do with clients is that life is a series of choices. You choose to do things because you get some benefits or you avoid some bad stuff. And, and rules are good. I mean, like the rule to be on time is really useful in a lot of situations. But if you're overly rigid about that, where I have to be on time, I can't be late, then it's going to bump up and bite you in the rear end sometimes in situations because you won't be able to accept or decide, okay, I'm going to be late, so what am I going to do about it? You don't get into that other form of thinking of problem solving, solution-based thinking as opposed to focusing on the problem. I'm going to be late. No, let's focus on what I'm going to do about it. I can call ahead. I can take another route. I can just explain what's going on, accept the consequences. But you never get there if you're focused on that circular. I want to be late. I can't be late. I have to be on time, so.
No, it's very true. And a lot of times it's just kind of more like, proper planning, because everybody used to, well, I know Laura, she'll be there 15 minutes early. I'm like, well, yeah, because I was always taught 15 minutes early is on time. Anything else is late.
Well,
I don't care if other people show up later, but I'm not going to be the one that rolls in the door. But it does happen.
Well, that gets to the whole idea of people that are constantly late. We would do this at school too. Okay, so it's a behavior pattern that has both habitual ways of acting as well as ways of thinking. Because the person who's habitually late, their thought pattern is, well, it's not that big a deal. We'll figure it out when I get there. And again, their habit pattern is they underestimate time and they don't prepare ahead of time. And so changing those behavior patterns, like with the kids, I'd say, okay, you get your stuff together the night before, so you just got to pick it up and leave. You figure out how long does it take. You add 5 minutes to it. I mean, again, military family background, right? We always got places 15 half hour early, right?
Yep,
got those great parking places. So that was bred into me, and learning to be less. I early on in the marriage, because my wife came from a background. She's Asian American, and we would arrive for an event, and people would slowly, family gather, and eventually a plan would kind of emerge, and we would take it. My family, it's you plan things out, you know what you're going to do, and at first that would drive me nuts. Just what are we going to do? What's the time? How's it going to be? And it took me a while to learn that. Okay, relax. It'll happen. This is just the way they work, and just enjoy the ride. So I had to desensitize to that whole thing. So
I had no problem desensitizing it to coming to Missouri, because Colorado, everything's like, normally go and everybody's on their horns and stuff.
Yeah,
everybody's laid back. It's a different environment. I'm like, they'll get here when they get here. That's fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely can be learned. Well, we are almost at time. What is on the horizon for you? Are you writing another book? Do you do one-on-one coaching? Are you ever going to go back to practicing, or?
Well, I'm retired.
Okay.
And so, I'm very busy for being retired. I play guitar, so at the church I do a couple services, and I've got a little group, and sometimes we do this and that. We just did a dinner last weekend. We call ourselves still kicking. Yeah.
I like that.
Well, yeah, because of our age, right? So,
it's just a number.
Yeah, for some people it's a very large number, but yeah, we just celebrated our 49th wedding anniversary just this year. So yeah, getting ready to move the big 50. So
nothing wrong with that. Nothing.
No, it's there's comfort to knowing a person really well, and to having predictability, and just having somebody that knows you and you know them, and you can share things with. Something that that's a whole nother discussion. Marriages and how they go through cycles, and reasons.
Oh yeah.
And it's sad that we pick our mate when we're young and stupid and aren't looking at the right things.
Some it works, some it does not.
Sometimes you luck out, and sometimes it doesn't. But for me, it's worked out, so it's been good.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here with us today and sharing your knowledge and stuff, because I think there's a lot of people that could really use help with the emotions, the whole anxiety, panics, especially with the stuff we've got going on nowadays. But
yeah,
thank you very much for taking the time for being with us here today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And everyone, so just so that you can always catch us on the YouTube channel, Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross, or Facebook. It's also the same thing, just add TV show at the end, because we have a whole host of guests and stuff coming up for you guys that we cover a variety of topics. And so if you don't want to miss out, go to the YouTube channel and you can connect with Reneau and a whole bunch of other speakers. But thank you again for joining us, and we will see you next week.